The absence of God. Once, a university professor entered his classroom to deliver a lecture. He began with a thought-provoking question. "Tell me," he said, "does everything that exists have a creator?" A student stood up and confidently replied, "Yes, everything that exists was created by God." The professor smiled slightly and continued, "So if God created everything, then God also created evil, and if our actions define who we are, then doesn't that make God evil?" The classroom fell silent. The student was unable to respond, and the professor looked pleased, believing he had once again proven that faith in God was nothing more than a myth. But then, another student slowly raised his hand. "Professor, may I ask you a question?" "Of course," said the professor. The student asked, "Sir, does cold exist?" "Of course," replied the professor, puzzled. "Haven't you ever felt cold?" The class laughed at the seemingly simple question. The student smiled and said calmly, "Actually, sir, cold doesn't truly exist. According to the laws of physics, what we call cold is merely the absence of heat. Absolute zero is the complete absence of heat energy. We created the word cold to describe what we feel when there is no heat." The professor raised an eyebrow. The student continued, "Now, sir, may I ask another question? Does darkness exist?" "Of course it does," replied the professor confidently. "Once again, you are mistaken, sir," said the student. "Darkness doesn't exist either. It is simply the absence of light. You can study light, measure it, and even separate it into various colors using a prism, but you cannot measure darkness. We only measure how much light is present. Darkness is just a term we use when light is missing." The classroom was now completely silent. Finally, the student asked softly, "Sir, does evil exist?" The professor replied, "Yes, of course. We see its effects every day. Violence, hatred, cruelty, and suffering everywhere." The student nodded and said, "You're right that these things exist, but evil itself does not. Evil is not a creation of God. It is, rather, the absence of God in the human heart, just as darkness is the absence of light, and cold is the absence of heat. When people forget God's love and goodness, what remains is what we call evil." The professor stood speechless, and the entire class sat in awe at this simple yet profound truth. If you like my story, please like, comment, and subscribe.